Hi, everyone. Welcome to the EFC webinar on being church and neighbor during COVID-19. And welcome to my kitchen, which I cleaned for you today. I'm Karen Stiller. I'm one of the editors of Faith Today magazine, and we have Faith Today co-editor Bill Fledderus here as a host today as well. Hi, Bill.
Hi from my basement in Hamilton, Ontario.
Your basement looks more professional than my kitchen. But
well,
we're doing what we can.
That's right.
Yes. Often these webinars feature an expert or two on an issue that's facing Canada, and we dig into the expert's knowledge about a certain topic. Today, we're operating on the assumption that there really aren't too many experts on how to be and do church during this really challenging time for all of us, and that there's an awful lot of learning and creativity happening on the field and in real life each and every day. So that's what we're hoping to tap into today. We want to hear and therefore share what you've been doing and learning and trying out in your congregations or in your neighborhoods and in your life and witness as a Christian. So there's no idea too small or too ordinary. So we're really hoping for a time of sharing. So please use the chat function when you want to speak. If you're on Facebook, watching this on Facebook Live, comment and someone is there watching. And if you're on Zoom, use the raise hand function.
Yeah, I was going to say for people who haven't used Zoom before, you might have to just put your cursor in front of the screen so that you get a bunch of icons along the bottom, and one of those icons will be raise hand. So it's not that hard.
Good. Thank you.
Karen, why don't we start with you? Your husband's a pastor in Ottawa, and so you're obviously heavily involved in a church there. What is your church doing? What you've been doing so far?
Yeah, I think like everyone else, we were just scrambling in a way and trying to figure this out as we went along. So immediately with services, we went to so far Facebook Live. We're streaming our services on Sunday through Facebook Live, and also exploring other ways. I know some churches are using Zoom and some are doing both, so we're trying to figure that out. We are Anglican, and we have weekly online services as well now that used to happen in the church. So some morning prayer and maybe eventually evening prayer. And we're trying to figure out, sort of how much would help people and what is also a kind of overload for people. We had our churches in downtown Ottawa, and we have a Friday night ministry called A Place to Go, where some of our maybe more marginalized neighbors and friends would come in and we would serve them a meal, and it was a time of visiting and listening and fellowship. That has completely changed, of course, and so now we're calling it A Meal to Go, and a very small number of volunteers make sandwiches, and we fill up food bags and basically put them out on a table just inside the front door of our church, and our friends come in and take turns basically taking a bag and leaving. And then with the leftovers, because so far we have had leftovers, actually Brent and I, my husband and I and our daughter, have been taking them down a busy downtown street in Ottawa on Saturdays and offering them to people who are clearly in need and or asking for help. So that's sort of combining church and neighbor, I guess. Within our congregation, we've had people step forward with creative ideas, which has been awesome. One of which is, having people sign up if they want help, and having people sign up if they're able to help by even just calling elderly parishioners or shut-ins or people who are lonely. They don't have to be elderly. And also, we had another young woman in our church come forward with this awesome idea to use this time as a way to get to know each other better. And so she basically created a questionnaire with some serious questions and some more fun that we can fill out, and they're circulated to just within the church, along with a picture. So, what are your interests? Who are you in isolation with? What food are you missing? that kind of thing. So
Is that a one-on-one back and forth, or is that kind of survey going to be circulated to a small group, or?
the whole church.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the whole church. So I really love that idea. I think that's like taking this opportunity and making the most of it in a way to get to know each other. We're probably a medium-sized church, but like large enough that, you know, there's still people that I don't really know, and we've been there 3 years. So I love that idea of just creating that kind of friendship at a time like this. So yeah, so that's where we are on week 2 or whatever week we're in of this. How about your church, Bill?
I was just going to say the survey that you described just made me think of like a photo directory. A lot of churches have
Yeah.
a photo directory, so it's kind of like an expanded photo directory that you're putting together on the fly. That sounds really great.
Exactly.
My church is probably a little smaller than yours. I'm in Hamilton. Our church is 100 some people. We have less than that usually on a Sunday morning. And what I found really great during this time is that our pastor has started holding a lunchtime prayer on Tuesday and Thursday that people can join online for. It's kind of a mini service, or sort of like a liturgical time. So we will pray with scripture together. We'll listen to a hymn or two together. And then there's times of prayer where we'll say, let's pray for our local leaders or whatever, and then people can share. There's a time of silence. So initially we did it on Facebook Live, and so people would type in on the chat, I'd like to pray for this or that. And then now we switched to doing it on Zoom. So we're a small enough church that we can actually, instead of doing it on a webinar kind of format, we just do it as a meet. So you can see everybody's face that's there. And if someone has something they want to contribute, then they just contribute, right? So it's more like sitting in a circle and chatting. I've worked at home for many years as a magazine editor, and I have really been blessed by this whole idea of meeting in the middle of the week for half an hour or whatever over lunch. I feel closer to the rest of my congregation now than normally. So I think that's been really great. And then Sunday morning online worship is probably like a lot of other churches are doing. Ours are being done on YouTube. A couple of things that I think are kind of neat about it, they're hosted by our pastor, but then there are a lot of little video inserts, pre-recorded inserts that are made part of the Sunday morning worship service. So, and a lot of them just try to mimic what we do in a normal service. So for example, in a normal service, we'll have 2 people reading scripture, and there's a sort of rotation of church members who read scripture. So the way that we're doing that digitally is people are pre-recording their scripture reading on their phone or whatever, and then sending it in on Friday or whatever. So when we do our Sunday morning worship, they can just play that little video of the familiar face from the congregation reading scripture. Similarly,
That's cool.
yeah, it's really quite neat. And another thing like that is for children, we usually read a picture book and each week during the service. And so again, that's a pre-recorded segment that someone sits outside on a sunny day or whatever on their lawn, and they read a picture book to the camera. And then that's been submitted also, during the week or whatever. And then, so then during the worship service, again, it's really making use of the familiar face in the congregation. So it really feels, instead of using sort of cookie cutter stuff from outside, it's just homemade stuff. So maybe the quality of it isn't, super excellently perfect, but for me, again, that feeling part of the congregation and connecting with the other people that I normally worship with is so valuable. One more example of that is after the service last Sunday, we had been invited to send in selfies of what we're doing during the pandemic. And so people from the church did that. And so after the service was formally over, sort of like your coffee greeting time, they ran a slideshow of all these selfies. And so you could see the people that usually sit next to you in the pew or whatever, working in their garden, doing chalk drawings on their sidewalk, and all those things. And again, it was sort of just another feel of, yes, we're in this together. We may not get to see these people that we usually see every week, but we can see them this way. So that's great. And I'll even say one more thing. Our church also supports a food bank in Hamilton. And so there was another little insert, again, a pre-recorded bit from people that work at the food bank giving us an update on how they're coping in the situation as part of the service. Like, so we could pray for them, but then we also know, and we get a direct report from them about, how they're coping. Again, a little bit like you having prepared food in hampers or bags, and then people who are in need can just kind of come and pick them up. So they're still being served and meeting the needs of those people. And they also shared about how they'd organized a phone calling tree for elderly people that usually take advantage of the food bank, and that they're getting called every day by someone to just check in on them, which I thought was great and very reassuring.
Yeah, that is so good. I was really struck by the selfie idea. I love the selfie idea.
Yeah, I mean, those are, the congregation, these are the people that you worship with, that you love God together with. And so you don't want to, you want to be reminded of that, right? And for me, it was very heartwarming and neat, and everyone's funny, right? Like, people draw funny pictures on their sidewalk. And so it's just it's very casual, and it worked nicely just after the service, right? So.
And they are posting that right on the YouTube stream, kind
No,
of.
in this case, I think they all sent them into the church office, and then
Okay.
the church office made a little slideshow, because the way that
Ah,
our Sunday worship is being done on YouTube. So there's interactivity in the sense of you can type a chat on the YouTube channel, or you can send a text to the pastor during the service.
okay.
But it's not like the midweek Zoom where you can have your face be up on the screen or whatever. So they're trying to collect all those elements before the actual service, and then put together kind of a semi-professional presentation on the Sunday morning.
Oh, that's so good. And I think both of the main ideas you and I have just shared are all about creating community and bringing
Yep.
comfort and so on to our fellow church members. That's so important right now. So for people who are watching on Facebook or Zoom, we'd love to hear about some of the ideas you are doing. As small and ordinary as they seem. I mean, these are the days of small and ordinary, I think. So what are you doing to help create community and fellowship and love and care among the people who attend your church and neighbors? I mean, I think that's been one of the really confusing realities of this, is that the way we would normally do church and be church in a community crisis, reaching out, welcoming in, giving things, caring physically for our neighbors, is not possible now. And that's a super challenge. Like, when we thought that we might have to completely cancel our place to go ministry, it was just like heartbreaking and hard to imagine how that could be the right response. So, turning it to a meal to go was such a relief to us, as well as the people we serve and befriend, I think. But so in terms of our neighborhood, like, we live in downtown Ottawa, and we just moved here actually in September. And so we don't know a lot of our actual neighbors well. But I'm seeing like calls for putting, pictures in windows for kids to go on scavenger hunts and that sort of thing. Or, I've been putting a sign in the window you see behind you to say hello to our neighbors who live in the next house, until I thought maybe this is annoying. So I've actually hit pause on that. But, even that is true, that we're kind of making this up as we go along in a way, and not everything will work. Which of course makes me think of the funny Facebook videos of things going wrong, like the priest who set himself on fire with the candles and that kind of thing. So we
Yes,
have to.
or the one I saw of the priest with his Facebook filters engaged with bunny ears and whatnot by accident. So.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So we have to be gracious with one another with our technical blunders. We have an EFC podcast as well, and I interviewed a couple of churches last week for a podcast that we'll release this coming week, I think, about what they're doing. And I spoke to one of Canada's largest churches, and then I also spoke to, an ordinary sized congregation in Fredericton, New Brunswick. And what I heard from both of those churches was that just we are trying our best, and this is a marathon and not a sprint. And I think maybe the first week of response was kind of in sprint mode, where
Yeah.
we were, trying to solve everything at once. And now I think we're all realizing that it's a marathon. And so both of these churches on, I'd say, either end of the large scale and the large small scale, and also the technical scale, like presumably Center Street Calgary already knows really well how to do great things online, but I still heard from them that they were, figuring this out as they go along. So there's a comfort there, I think.
Yeah, our church, and I think incremental steps are what is really within reach for all of us, right? So our church already had a small private Facebook group for members. Anybody could sign up for it or not, and people would occasionally share prayer requests and things like that. And so that has just taken it up a notch, sort of thing, and now it's being used more. And initially we were using it even for the Facebook Live videos of those midweek prayers. So I think that that marathon reality, one of the best ways for us to cope with that is just to try to make incremental improvements, and like you say, not to try to solve everything the first week.
Yeah. You and I both did a little digging around and research for this time together so that we could share some ideas that we had found. And one I found that is just so, again, kind of like retro and old school, but it was a paper newsletter for your church, an in-print kind of old-fashioned church newsletter. And I know that for lots of churches, that's not old-fashioned. They've never gotten rid of their church newsletter. But I would say that in the churches I've attended in the last 10 or 15 years, that was not a thing anymore. So I loved that idea, a church newsletter that gets mailed out.
So they're sending it through Canada Post to
Yeah,
people's houses?
I
Okay.
think they must be, or dropping off,
Okay.
I think is also still a thing.
Yeah, we have a refugee family on our street that our church has sponsored, and I can look out my window sometimes and I see them going for a walk or whatever. And I've also seen people from our church come to check in on them and stand sort of on the curb, and the refugees are standing up on the front lawn, 15 feet apart or whatever, but that contact is going on, that face-to-face is going on too. So
Yeah.
it's a little awkward, but it works.
Yeah, that's right. So dropping off and
Yeah,
visiting through windows is well, I'm so wary of giving out anything that might sound like advice about interaction with people, but we know that that's happening. Another thing I saw that really struck me was a drive-through confession, actually, with a Catholic priest. I think this was from the States, but I'd like to introduce this idea by saying that it has struck me that we can scale up or scale down ideas, depending on our own churches. So what I saw was an image of a Catholic priest on a bench wearing a blindfold, actually, as parishioners would drive through, keeping that distance, and they were doing confession. So I'm not Catholic, but what I thought was, well, first of all, that's innovative and I think really cool. And then I thought, maybe something pastorally could happen in that way for churches, whether it was confession or not, but some kind of drive-through visitation. And I've heard of drive-in churches experimenting with a drive-in, as we used to do drive-in movies. And I heard of a Canadian church who was looking into that for their Easter service. Of course, that requires a big parking lot, but I thought that was pretty creative.
Yeah, you probably couldn't park between the lines the way you normally would. You'd have to say everybody gets 2 spots or something instead of 1.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be a little hard to figure out, and there would be no popcorn, probably. But still,
people have the opportunity to come out to things, right? So even just the novelty aspect sometimes, that someone's trying something, even if it doesn't a huge
Yeah.
success, it can still be a blessing to people in the sense that they're feeling cared for.
Yeah, for sure. Another, this is like, again, this is almost like the paper newsletter idea. It's very obvious, but calling through the parish list, like I know that's something my husband and his team are trying to do now, and we'll keep doing, literally picking up the phone and calling people. I think that's, makes perfect sense. And that's what one of the things that struck me when I spoke with a pastor from Center Street Church in Calgary, again, one of Canada's largest congregations. That's one of the things they're doing. They're just calling everybody.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Yeah, and again, I mean, you can do it. You can have a pastoral care team do it, or you can also pair people up, right, on some
Yes.
kind of an ongoing basis. One of the things that I've seen that's neat, again, just speaking from my local church situation, is on that Facebook group that's private for our church, a young adult put forward a post to say, I have time available. If there's some errands that I can run for somebody, I'd really be glad to do that sort of thing. And I just thought that was a great example of someone taking up an opportunity to serve.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Another idea that, again, I think goes back to the whole missional way of thinking that churches were really focusing on a few years ago, like even the word missional. But one of the tenets of that type of thinking and ways of being church was partnering with other people and finding out, that question, what is God already doing in a community? So another tip I came across that, again, probably seems obvious, but was calling other churches and finding out how you could come alongside or how you could do things together.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm sure that food banks and other maybe secular organizations that support communities in need right now are probably really feeling this. So I wonder how our church families could come alongside those places as well.
My father-in-law manages a food bank nearby, and has traditionally relied on a lot of volunteers who are seniors. And of course, because they're seniors, they have to stop volunteering because they're more at risk, right?
Yeah.
Even to just come in and pack those lunch bags or whatever, they've all basically said that they recognize that the risk is too high. So there are cases like that where senior volunteers that may have done a certain task, maybe it's time for young adults to step up and or for that communication to happen, to say we need replacement volunteers because our usual crew is not able to come at this time.
Yeah. That's really, yeah, that's right. Like, we're all being stretched. There's no a question about that. So here's a great comment that's just come in. I heard a story about a regular church attender in a retirement home who didn't have the technology to watch the service online. And of course, that's got to be a real issue that churches need to think about, is not all of our seniors necessarily get Zoom or are on Facebook. So somebody in the congregation called her on the phone and let her listen to the online service live. That's really thinking. That's a wonderful thing to do. Along those lines, I wondered about connecting younger people with older people to walk them through, even on the phone, technical questions.
Yeah.
Like, I've been able to help my own mother figure things out, like how to edit a comment on Facebook by patiently and sometimes not so patiently speaking to her on the phone and just walking her through it.
Yeah.
So I think we could help our maybe less technically minded friends that way, and that's a really good thing.
Yeah, people have a little more time now, or theoretically, right? So, whereas you might have said, that's too painstaking for me to try to do it over the phone in the past, I'll actually come over and help you with it. Now we can actually do it the painstaking way, and hopefully, open more channels of communication for those people that some of these technological things are new to.
Yeah.
They may have the internet connection, but it's not so intuitive if you haven't used a lot of technology to how to get things started for the first time. So
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of technology, I think there may be an inclination or a tendency in some of us to think that larger churches that were already doing everything online are better positioned for this kind of a situation. But I know we had a great article on the EFC site and circulating the other day about based on some EFC research that's happening right now into small churches in Canada, that in fact smaller churches, in their DNA is relationship and connectivity and supporting, and so a small church is not necessarily at any kind of a disadvantage during this crisis. That there's something within the small to medium church life that means maybe we know how to care for one another in a way and that's not to take anything away from larger churches. I know they have that too in their small groups often and so on. So I really loved that thought
yeah,
too. And I commend that article to people that they can find on the EFC site. So
I think that idea you're talking about of congregations helping each other. An example that I heard of that was like that is even if you're a large church and you have broadcast facilities or taping facilities, check in on the small church down the road and invite the pastor maybe there to come and do a pre-recorded message in your facility.
oh,
If
that's neat.
if that meets health guidelines or not, right? Or in
Yeah.
what way can you share your technology or your your Zoom license or whatever it might be with the church down the road to help them during this time as well.
I love that. We have a comment from Albert. I know some churches use dial-in format with Zoom or Hangouts meeting to engage with those who only have access to the telephone. I didn't know that was a thing, so that's really great to hear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even when people are video chatting, you can also invite in people who are just calling by phone, right?
Yeah.
And so they can be part of the meeting. Even if they can't see the others, they can certainly hear.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah, what you're just saying about larger churches helping smaller churches, I really, it strikes me that this is a wonderful opportunity to be a good friend and to make new friends. And,
Yeah.
Even, the neighbors that I was maybe annoying with my, hey, have a good day signs in my kitchen window. I feel that after this is over, we could have them over for dinner now in a way that would have been really weird before, I think.
You at least have a conversation starter now.
Exactly. Yeah,
How did you really
exactly.
feel about my pictures? Let's talk.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
No, I think I mean we know that crisis brings opportunity, and this is a kind of crisis that I think most of us have not lived through before, and there is so a different kind of opportunity probably,
Yeah.
even as we try to figure it out together.
And thinking about the community, I mean, there's so many different segments, right? So you can think about your congregation. You can think about helping the congregation down the road. You can think about a local food bank.
Yeah.
But you can even think about your municipal government and, reaching out to your city councilor or to your mayor and saying, hey, I'm calling from church, whatever. And, I just want you to know that we're praying for you. We've got your back. We know you're going through a very stressful time and we're here to help. So if there's something, my church is located here and here, and, we have this many people. And if there's something that we can do that would help take care of our community, we'd be glad to do that. And when we can sort of see above the immediate problems around us and start looking a little higher and seizing those opportunities, I think it's a great chance to make connections, like you say, that will last long beyond this challenging time.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because it made me think of a conversation we had last week, which we're going to roll with in the next week or two, of encouraging people to contact their MPs or their senators or whomever and say thank you for working so hard for us right
Mm-hmm.
now, because we at the EFC we often encourage Canadians to contact their MPs to ask or request or share thoughts on an issue, issues that are very important to us, and that now is a time also that we can say thank you, and not to be manipulative or anything like that, but people really are working hard on the behalf of Canadians, and that it's a time to say thank you,
Yeah.
and just nothing more than that. And we're thinking of you too. So
Yeah.
I see someone said church partnership is very important. So yeah, we really agree with that. That's so important. And yeah, just praying for our cars, our churches, praying for our churches to have the partnership view. My eyes scattered down to the car rally scavenger hunt comment. Although I will pray for my car if it fails me now. So we see that from another comment that a youth group is still meeting electronically every week. They've started using a closed group on Band, which I'm not familiar with Band. They had a trivia night using Kahoot, where every youth could answer trivia questions on their own device. That's very cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, part of those things is, I think the continuity of whatever your usual practice is in a digital or virtual format is really a great goal to aim for, right?
Yeah.
Instead of thinking we need to do things totally differently, can we do them in a familiar way, as familiar a way as possible? I think that's reassuring to people. And so whatever that small group is that you're part of, or the coffee get together that maybe you do with some people from your church once in a while, or whatever those things can be converted to virtual and keep on going, then that's a great way, I think, a great
Yeah.
response.
Yeah. And I was thinking with the youth group comment and watching my own adult children who are with us, two of them. We have a son who's 19 living here, and our daughter is 21, and another son is in Fredericton. But they they can almost be our leaders in a little bit, because they do so much of their lives are digital. To begin with, and like my daughter is Zooming with her friends every evening, usually when we're about to start watching a movie together. And our son, of course, is in the of the gaming generation. But what I have come to realize as a mother, even as I, cluck my tongue at his, gaming life, that he's actually interacting with friends when he's doing it. So, of course, that can, there can be too much time spent, but they know how to connect digitally.
Yeah, it's very much a social phenomenon, right? It's a
Yeah.
social practice, and from in our social circles, I know many examples of people that are playing, board games through video chat with each other, and as well as full-scale electronic games where there are chat functions in the side.
Yeah. There's a wonderful comment suggestion from Joel. Our church reached out to healthcare workers in our church and the broader community, and found out they're in short supply of cleaning products. And that church has responded by making care packages with extra cleaning products that they have, and then arranging contactless and safe ways to deliver them. That's a great practical idea.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I see another comment there. We have a form on our church website so that people can indicate their ability to help and their needs so that they can connect them. So, very, very, can be done very basically. You don't need a fancy thing that you buy from a third party, but just to basically, if you want to volunteer, please enter your name and your availability, or if you have a need, please let us know how we can help you.
Yeah.
I've seen churches actually that do that as an internal thing, but also as a thing for the neighborhood as well. So if your church is able to do that, I mean, you could just throw that open to your neighbors as well and say, do you have needs? Let our church know, and we'll see if we can help to meet them.
Yeah, that's great. I love this comment from Linda. And I know that, again, I've really, like, in some ways a simple idea, but a really great one, that it's a good time for churches to not only help one another, but of course, but reach out to their communities. and having a message of encouragement on their outdoor signs. If you're a
Mm.
church that has an outdoor sign, so that as people are driving by, they can see the same message. We're praying for you. If you need to talk, call us. Yeah, I love that. That's just such a good idea. And Bill, you and I are communicators professionally, and so we think about what is the message that we're trying to share, and how. So we talk often about the what are we trying to say and how are we saying it. And in some ways, pardon me, this is a time for churches to ask themselves that questions too. So what do people need to hear from the church right now, internally, and well as our neighborhoods and our communities?
Mm-hmm. I see another comment there, just so we don't miss some of them. Someone, David's written in saying, normally our church has prayer teams after the church services, available after church services. In place of that, our church has set up its office number to be forwarded to prayer team leaders and is being used as a prayer line.
Yeah, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think people, that again, the message, and I'm sure your church is the same, but the message our church has been trying to share with people who attend is that, you are not alone. We are here for you. Tell us what you need.
Yeah.
And I think that's, so that I think of that with that prayer, to be able to call up your church office and leave a prayer request and know that someone will be responding is so helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, now's the time to think about your voicemail message and all those how does you present to the community or to someone that's calling in, right? If you,
Yeah.
maybe you want to change your voicemail message to say, I know a lot of church voicemails are, we meet Sunday at 10 or whatever, right? Have you thought to change that to say, we're not meeting right now, but you can join us online here and there. And if you're a community person calling and you would like some assistance, please leave a message and we'll be glad to get back to you and see if we can try to arrange a way to help in some way or other.
I just wrote down, check voicemail.
All right.
I am
Spontaneous.
100% going to mention that to my husband. Like probably they thought of it, but
Yeah.
that would be an easy thing to overlook.
That's what I thought of when you said about the church sign, or when the person mentioned about the church sign, right?
Yeah.
There's all these different ways that the church presents itself. It's sort of its public face, I guess you might say.
Yeah, no, that's really good. So Edward has asked a question, and I have an answer, and I think we would love to hear from other people. So how would church do communion in this digital age? And so yeah, the celebration of the Lord's Supper, how is that happening now? And I will say, again, as an Anglican, it's not happening right now. I think that's what I understand fairly across the board. And of course, I could be wrong with that, but my understanding and in our church is just not being celebrated right now. How about you, Bill? How are you folks handling that?
Our church doesn't have communion every Sunday. It's sort of on a regular routine. So I don't have an example to share about at this time. They may have a great plan in mind, but I haven't heard yet. So
yeah. I had heard about a church, and I don't know what tradition it was, but dropping off little communion packages on the doorsteps of their parishioners. And then I guess I'm guessing, consumed together online at a later prearranged time.
Right. I have seen stories or examples of churches where, it's a live church service and they say, we'll have communion, and people provide themselves with whatever bread and grape juice, wine that they have in their house, and they all partake at the same time and sort of make the best of it. And so again, depending on your tradition.
Yeah, because some traditions that would
Not good. I know. So,
but yeah, we're all different with this, right?
There's a lot of different churches and there's a lot of different ways to cope. And I think, I mean, even on a bigger scale, right? Like the examples that we're talking about work for some churches and not for others, right?
Exactly.
So I think the best thing we can do is be really open-minded and try and listen to all the stories and then filter through and say, how does it apply to my 50 people or my whatever, right? And
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, I see Roger has just commented that they did what you just said. I think our church held a communion service this last Sunday. Our pastor asked us all to fetch our bread and juice in our homes, and he led the communion time with scripture reading and prayer. Worked well. That's
Okay.
neat. I bet
Yeah.
that would be very moving.
It's, I think sometimes when we are sort of making stuff up as we go along, it just reminds us of the fragility and also the specialness of it, right? Like, the very first, the Last Supper was a prepared meal, but it was also, there was spontaneity to it in the sense, right, that this happened one time, right? And so that when we recapture that, there can be sometimes something special about that too.
Yeah, that's a really great way of looking at it, I think. For my own sort of journey through this as a minister's wife, in that funny little space we occupy in the life of the church, I think in the first few days I was in compare and panic mode in terms of church life, thinking like,
Okay.
well, what's that church doing? And we need to do that. And what if we did this and that? And then, yeah, I realized I was making things worse for my husband. So that stopped me, but also just realizing this is a long story that we're a part of right now. And we need to slow down and, yeah, do what is already in our DNA and already organic to us. And we will make some mistakes along the way, and some things won't work that we try to do. And some of our pastors will get too close to the candles and light themselves on fire.
Sure.
And we're all really, the feeling is deeply, I think, that we're all in this together. So
yeah, and let's be gracious with each other. One of the when our midweek prayer group switched from Facebook Live to Zoom the first time, our pastor tried to play a hymn that we could all sort of listen to and reflect on, and she couldn't figure out the technology, so she said, "Oh, sorry, I'll get it working for next Thursday," right? And so that's the thing we're all going through, right?
Yeah, that's really good. So we're in the last couple of minutes of our webinar time. So if anyone has been holding back on sharing an idea or a tip, now is the time to share it. We'd love to hear from you. At the EFC, we're continuing to compile resources. Maybe you want to share that address now, Bill.
Yeah, sure. So our website is theefc.ca. And if you go to that homepage, you can click there, or if you want to go directly, there's theefc.ca/COVID-19. So if you go to /COVID-19, there's a page of resources intended for churches, pastors, and Christian groups of all kinds. There are some links there, for example, about for Christian businesses. How are Christian businesses coping? Most of the materials are focused on congregations. There are some good links about finances and giving at this time, which is obviously challenging for many churches. So there's some very specialized bits of advice. Some of it is pre-recorded videos. Some of it is text-based articles. And again, like this webinar, you can sort of pick through what might be useful for you, and hopefully you'll get some inspiration from that. We also welcome contributions to that webpage. So if your congregation or your church tradition is doing something that could be beneficial to others, let us know about it, and we'll just add it to that page for people to look at.
Yeah, that's so good. And we also have the EFC podcast that you can find also at the efc.ca. And we're shifting, the focus of the podcast to reflect the situation we're in. So we did a very early one where everyone was, very early days. And then last week we released a podcast where I interviewed a therapist, Sharon Ramsey, and she gave just some really great tips on keeping well mentally and spiritually and relationally during this time. And then I mentioned earlier, I spoke with 3 different Canadian churches last week from different parts of the country, different denominations, different sizes. And that, I think, will be helpful to people as well. And I think that will be released this week. So we're going to keep that kind of a focus on the podcast in the next, in the coming weeks until, the situation, maybe life goes back to that new normal that we're all expecting. So yeah, I think the message we want to share is that we're here to walk alongside and to help and gather and share information. That's one of the things we're good at. That's in our DNA, and we want to keep doing that. So, there's a final comment from Edward that's very helpful, encouraging us that the pandemic is giving us a chance to reflect on what church is. That is 100% the case, I think. The importance of the church gathered and the church scattered, and how to keep that sense of call while we are scattered. God may want us to move to a stage of new normal. Yeah, that's really helpful, and thank you for that.
Yeah, great wisdom. Much appreciated.
Yeah, so thank you to everyone who's joined us today. This will be recorded and added to our COVID-19 page that Bill mentioned. And we would love, as Bill said, we would love for you to keep sending us your suggestions, your tips, your experiences, your good and bad stories of what worked and what didn't. People can learn from that type of thing as well. So we are in this together, and we're just so grateful to have had the chance to meet today. And it was fun, Bill, to do it with you.
Yes, always fun. God bless you all, and we will look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, thank you.